Hello and welcome back to Slick Talk. This is your host, Blackstone Joe. Today is January 4th, and for episode 29, we are talking about TBNs and TANs. Do you need them? If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry. We are going to describe these tests, exactly what they are, what they mean, and kind of assign them to certain situations. And for veterans of the industry who know what we are all about, some of this is going to be old hat, but I think you'll still learn some surprising information about what exactly we glean from these tests, the value of them, and why you may or may not want to tack on that extra $10 to your standard analysis. We also have a couple special announcements, a question that fell in the catch pan, so we have a lot to get to today. So without further ado, let's start the show. So we're going to start by breaking things down with a little announcement. We have another Q&A with the analyst coming up. So we want to get those questions in from you all, the listeners. Now, the deadline to submit questions for this Q&A with the analyst is going to be January 11th. So don't hesitate. The easiest way to get your questions sent our way is Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can also email us. The email is bstone@blackstone-labs.com. And when you're perusing social media and you're trying to find us, keep in mind that there is more than one Blackstone Labs. And kind of one of the fun things is when we get emails from folks who are trying to contact another company by the name of Blackstone Labs. They do like nutrition supplements, things of that nature. So definitely a little bit outside of our wheelhouse. We'll field some of their emails. They'll field some of ours. So if you're trying to contact Blackstone Laboratories, just make sure you have the correct username in place. Like, for example, the Twitter, that's going to be Blackstone_Labs. And Facebook, you're going to find us just by typing in Blackstone Laboratories. Instagram, same idea. You're going to be able to find us just by typing in Blackstone Labs. And we will pop up. You'll see our logo with a white background with black font. So just make sure you have the right Blackstone Labs. We don't want to get any confusion. We don't want to lose any questions. We want to get those questions in for our Q&A with the analyst. And for today's Catch Pan segment, we had a question come in from friend of the program, Adam, and he asked, does ATF marry to the transmission? And that's a good question. It's one we delved into in a recent episode talking about ATF and what to do with it. But the thing is, we have so many episodes and we have so much content out there right now that we fully understand if some of you don't catch every single episode, every single soundbite. So we want to cover these questions, these frequently asked questions as often as possible. And that way you are always getting a refresher or you're learning it for the first time. We don't want to leave anyone in the dark. So does ATF marry to the transmission? All right. I guess it would be fair to say yes in a sense, in that any oil will slowly solidify, will sludge up, will become solid as it oxidizes, as it's exposed to heat in use. So in a sense, yeah, I mean, it's going to make a home in there, and it's going to stop doing what it needs to do because it's going to slowly just accumulate so much metal and solid material that the ATF is not going to be able to do its job. And as it loses its viscosity, as it becomes solid, yeah, I suppose there's probably a little bit of a marriage going on there, but not a good one. This is one that we want to break up immediately. This is a midnight special celebrity Vegas marriage that you want to make sure stops before anyone gets hurt. You do want to follow a service plan with transmissions. You don't need to just dump it all the time. I don't want to get folks into the mindset that, oh, well, every 10,000 miles, change it. No, it's not like that. It's not like engine oil. It can go longer, but you want to nevertheless follow, at least until you know what to expect from your transmission, and until you've got a couple samples in, how things are going. You don't want to let it go forever, but you do need to get a look at that. And an easy way to do so is to sample it without draining, just taking it from the dipstick. Not every transmission has this, but if you can sample it without doing a full drain, full flush, I should say, or at the very least, you could do a drain and fill and get a look at it that way. But you don't need to buy into this logic that transmissions need the same oil forever. It's just simply oil will become overwhelmed. And when it does, it's not going to work well. And then all of a sudden, you have a transmission that can have problems because the oil was simply left in there for too long. So don't buy into the myth of ATF not being something you should ever touch. That's just not true. But at the same time, we are not trying to tell you to be overly proactive. I would say start with a manufacturer guideline and sample it, see what it looks like, go from there, and then you can kind of attack your maintenance plan that way. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about some tests, TBNs, TANs, and I guess we'll give a little bit of an opening salvo with the standard analysis. So think of the standard analysis, which is what we do on most samples that come in. Think of that like the works at a car wash. You are really, if you want a way to get that car looking nice and in all aspects, you want a wheel bright, a tire shine, a underbody, you want everything. You want that car to look great. You want the works. All right. Now, I assume that just like at a car wash, you might hear some questions that we hear, which is, do I need anything else? Anything else that's not on your menu but might really take it to another level? It happens a lot. People, especially if they're trying to hunt down a problem, people will want to really check into all of our capabilities and make sure that we aren't hiding any secret menu options. So if you're looking for a problem and you only know of our standard analysis, maybe you don't even know there is a standard analysis. You just send us in a sample and ask for that sample to be tested. We would never keep you in the dark and say, hey, it looks like you're trying to find a problem. By the way, there's these tests you didn't ask for. We didn't run them. But if we had, we might have found what you're looking for. You know what I mean? We are always going to be upfront. So if you say you're looking for a certain kind of problem, we will say, okay, we can identify that with our standard analysis, and then we'll point it out. Or we will say if it's like a sample of diesel fuel, and you want to know if there's bacterial growth, which is something that can happen with diesel fuel if moisture is getting in. We would definitely take a moment and say, hey, looks like you're trying to find bacterial growth. That's a separate test apart from our regular diesel fuel testing. We'll let you know if there's information that we can't learn with just the standard analysis. The standard analysis is also something you don't need to specify. We will run that just as a standard operating procedure. And then if you ask for anything else, that's when we kind of need to be directly aware if you want something besides standard. So if you want TBN or if you want TAN, then just let us know on the slip, and then we'll proceed with those as well. So TBNs and TANs, time to get into that. What are these tests? What do they mean? And what's the value? So we're going to start with the TBN, and I'm going to start by going into the areas that's relevant, areas it's not, because it can kind of trip some people up. So this test is referring to the total base number, which measures how much active additive is remaining in the oil. So for lay people, the reason you would want a TBN primarily is to see how the oil's holding up. People want to go longer between oil changes, and they want to see, okay, in conjunction with everything else, is the TBN strong? Does it show I can run the oil longer? Now, the tricky thing here, though, this is really only relevant to gasoline and diesel engines that are in an automotive application primarily. Because here's the thing, if you look into aircraft engines, a lot of them are running oils that don't have the same additives that you'll find in oil used for a car or a truck. And these additives, these ingredients, are what boost a TBN. So if I were to take a sample from a Lycoming, running Aeroshell 1550, it's going to have a very, very low TBN, maybe not even any. It might just be 0.0 because the additives are not there. That's not to say it's bad oil, though. It's comparing apples to oranges. Because if I take a sample from my truck, it's going to have a stronger TBN no matter what, because, in comparison to an aircraft sample, because it has additives, specifically calcium, magnesium, detergent dispersant additives that are going to boost the TBN. So if you want to know how the oil's holding up in aircraft, you don't need a TBN. You can rely more so on the physical properties, and of course, see how that oil's working when you look at things like wear levels and how they compare. So if you want to know how that oil's holding up, if you can run it longer, ask for a TBN if you're the owner of a car, truck, van, whatever is using a gas diesel engine in an automotive application. So you don't need it for all engines, and you also don't need it for transmissions. Similar to aircraft engine oil, transmission oil does not have the same additives serving the same purpose as engine oil does. One thing you can do with transmissions, though, and in applications like, say, if you're in the industrial world and you have hydraulic equipment, you have any sort of gearbox that needs oil to do its job, you can look into a TAN. That's the total acid number. Oil accumulates acidity as it's in use. And there are specific guidelines for some manufacturers for the total acid number. So it can loom pretty large in the industrial field. You can run a TAN on gasoline engine oil, but it's really not a necessity. Here's why. Yes, engine oil does accumulate acidity, but I would rely on the TBN if it were me, because the TAN can be as high as you want it to be. Okay, let's just say it's some ungodly number. If I have a TBN that's strong, that shows active additive remaining to combat those acids, I'm just not terribly worried what the TAN is. Because the whole point is the oil and how it's holding up. Is it working well? If so, then I'm not really terribly worried about what the TAN is. So enthusiasts, people who really want to take care of their stuff, it's not uncommon for them to say, all right, I need a standard analysis, a TBN, I need a TAN. And one thing is, we would never encourage just the whole buffet. Because just like any buffet, there are some options that you should probably not touch. There's some options that might be good depending on what day of the week it is. And then there are some options that are obviously essential. The orange chicken at the Chinese buffet is essential. The soft serve ice cream, dicey at best. So true story. I was burned as a youth by soft serve at a Chinese buffet. It was my own fault, but I digress. When you're looking for tests and you're looking to learn how that oil is holding up, or anything else, you're trying to find a problem, Just state on the slip what you're looking for, what your specific concern is, and then we'll take it from there. If we know that there are some tests that you would probably be interested in, that you could probably utilize, we'll be sure to mention it, especially if you're looking for answers that a standard analysis won't give. We'll be sure to let you know. But we don't oversell it. And that's probably one of my favorite things about being at Blackstone, being in this culture, is we are not the types to overly encourage anything as far as folks checking back, tacking on additional tests. It's not something we worry about because we know that simply covering the bases when it comes to looking at the oil's physical properties and wear levels and everything contained within the standard analysis, we know what we're able to get out of that. And we wouldn't in good conscience just be throwing whatever at the wall that sticks so we can get people to pay for. It's always going to be need-based when it comes to what I recommend and what other analysts in the building recommend. So if you're looking for TBN or TAN, first consider what you have. So I'll just cover a little bit more with the TANs just before we close that topic out. If you have a transmission, a TAN is applicable. Remember, I talked about TBN not so much. A TAN will measure that acidity that accumulates. And as you sample a transmission repeatedly, you can start to see how that TAN is consistently. So it will surprise a lot of people. Even lay folks, I think, might be somewhat surprised by this, but oil, even out of the bottle, contains some acidity. It's not 0.0. It has some. So when it comes to a TAN, again, transmission oils, industrial, it's helpful. When it comes to engine oil, TBN, absolutely. Mainly if you're looking at automotive applications, though, not necessarily aircraft. We can do a TBN and TAN on engine oil. It's just not something that I would stress as terribly important. If any of this is kind of like tangling your minds a little bit, we obviously would be happy to revisit this topic and field any specific questions you have about these special tests, just to give you a little bit of a rundown to leave you with so we can all keep track. Standard analysis, if this is something you're interested in to find out how the engine's doing, you're looking for contamination, you're looking for evidence of mechanical issues, you want to see how the oil's holding up, all that. $30 for standard analysis. TBNs and TANs are $10 a piece. And for those interested in sampling more than one vehicle, you know you're a frequent flyer, or maybe it's the same vehicle and you just want to have a cheaper price for these tests, we do offer bulk rates. And the thing is you can prepay for, starting with 6 analyses, that's where it kicks in. You can prepay for it and then have that credit waiting for you whenever you're ready to sample. So if you have one sample, that's okay if it's your only sample for a while and you prepaid for 6. You can have those other 5 waiting whenever you're ready. So TBNs, TANs. I hope today we've learned a lot more about what those are, their purposes, and what you need to look into when you're trying to find specific information. As always, you can expect us to be upfront and thorough when we are looking for a problem. If we know that there's another test you would need, we'll be sure to recommend it. But going in, I hope this now prepares some of you when you're wondering what to go with, when you want to know exactly how your transmission or your engine is doing. Now you know a little bit more about what tests you should be asking for and what you can expect from certain tests, because there's different information coming out of every test. So the more you know, the more prepared you are to find out how to keep that engine, how to keep that transmission running and running well. All right, that wraps up today's topic. But before I leave you all, just remember Q&A with the analyst. We're doing another show, and the deadline to submit questions for this show is January 11th. So please do reach out to our Instagram, Blackstone Laboratories, our Twitter, Blackstone_labs. You can also email us, bstone@blackstone-labs.com. However you want to reach out, just make sure you get those questions sent in and we'll be sure to address them. Thanks for listening.